Hi, I'm Jen. I make videos about my life and adventures as a 50-something, silver and solo, pre-retirement Gen Xer. Today's video is about the single life and what everyone seems to get wrong about living solo. I'll be turning 59 this year, and I have always been single. At this point, embracing my solitude is not a circumstance, but a choice. It's as natural for me as being green-eyed or silver-haired. When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, the prevailing attitude was nobody really wants to be single, and single people were to be pitied. Oh, how sad and lonely she must be. But alone and lonely are not the same thing. Being alone is a physical state. You are by yourself. Loneliness is a vacuum, a social or emotional need not being met that brings on feelings of sadness. What this means is that you can be alone but not lonely, and you can be lonely even if you're in a relationship or surrounded by people. People like me who choose to be alone live our best lives solo. It's the most fulfilling way to live for us. I love the freedom of being solo. I love the solitude. I would be unhappy if I wasn't living alone. I remember those prison movies from the 70s, like The Longest Yard and Brubaker or Cool Hand Luke. Maybe Cool Hand Luke was the 60s, but anyhow, there was a whole genre of prison movies in the late 60s, early 70s. And the biggest punishment in all of these movies was getting thrown into solitary confinement, getting thrown in the hole. The horror, the mental anguish, those poor people who got thrown in the hole, they were destroyed by it. I did not get that. I watched those movies and I was just like, but isn't it safer in solitary? It seems quite dangerous out in general population. I think I would be, more likely to want to be in solitary. As a matter of fact, I often thought solitary confinement was not a big punishment at all. I couldn't understand it. You were alone, you were safe, you got fed, you got to go outside and not have to interact with any other people. 1 hour of walking around the yard per day. I mean, if you had to be in prison, I wouldn't want to be in prison, but if you had to be, I would volunteer for solitary confinement. In studies that explore the paradox of solitude, which is that on one hand, spending time alone is good for creativity, spirituality, and reflection. On the other hand, solitude is often experienced as unwelcome and painful, i.e., we need to be alone, but we don't like it. In those studies, they find that people who do not get as much time to themselves as they want are as stressed and sad and dissatisfied as people who get more alone time than they want. I am definitely in the former camp. If I don't get enough alone time, I am a miserable person. For those of us who are single by choice, our love of solitude can be a superpower because we appreciate the time we have to ourselves, and our comfort in being alone means we're rarely lonely. I value companionship and I like to socialize, but I love being alone. One of the most enduring myths about single people is that they want, more than anything else, to escape their single lives and become romantically coupled. In a study of more than 3,000 adults who were single, researchers found that in every adult age group, the single people's ratings of their satisfaction with their lives weighed heavily towards the satisfied end of the scale. What's more, starting at age 40 and continuing on for decades to come, the single people grew more and more satisfied with their lives. Now, and I'm not going to turn this into a TED Talk, and I will put links to these studies in the description down below. But in the 1970s, Ronald Engelhart wrote a book and coined the term post-materialism. I've popped a screenshot of what that means up, and in 2017, in a study of more than 200,000 people from over 30 European countries, both married and unmarried adults said that individualist values such as freedom, creativity, and trying new things were important to them. These are all what are known as post-materialistic values. But single people cared about those values even more than married people did, and they got more happiness out of their embrace of those values. Freedom, creativity, and trying new things. I'm feeling very post-materialistic right now. Now, people who lead traditional coupled lives can have many of the same freedoms that single people do. But autonomy doesn't seem to occupy such a central space in their lives as it does for single people. We like being the deciders in our lives, whether that means having control over our money and how we spend it, embracing self-care, focusing on creative endeavors, or exploring intellectual challenges. For example, I've begun buying a locally sourced and produced chai tea blend. It costs a little more because it's organic and therefore healthier, I guess. It's a little messier than bags because it's loose leaf, but I like the little morning ritual that I have to make it. It's caffeine-free and calming. I can drink it all day. It feels like a treat. It feels like I'm special. I've also got little pots of seeds sprouting all over the house. Almost every window has these little pots. Cosmos and cornflowers, yarrow, chamomile, asters, lupin, peppers, and tomatoes are all percolating in pots right now, and I'm gonna have the most colorful, fragrant, and yummy summer I've ever had in my backyard this year. These are examples of self-care routines, and I have lots of them, and they're all for me, all the time.
I also recently took a weekend course in Introduction to Stained Glass Making. I have never done anything like this before, and I went on my own, no buddy, no friend, but just because I wanted to try something new. And stained glass is beautiful, it's creative. I love old churches. I love looking at the windows in old churches, and I just thought I should try that. The instructor was a woman in her 60s. 5 out of the 8 of us were all women in my age group as well, all there on their own, and not all of us were newbies. None of us had any skills whatsoever. It was like the funnest afternoon. I cut my finger twice, 2 fingers. My window is not perfect. Let me show you. So it is not perfect. I would change the colors, I think. Yes, I would change the colors, and the solder is quite rustic. Let's put it rustic. So I would pay more attention to that, but it's the first time that I've ever done soldering. So there it is, my stained glass creation. Not the greatest, but I loved it. I loved my little window. I loved the class. I loved the whole experience of it, and I'm really glad that I did it. Now, would I take this up as a hobby and start taking classes, formally? No. I think that my stained glass viewing will just have to be in the wild and not homemade. It's just not going to be my thing. But I did it, and I'm glad I did it because it was far out of my wheelhouse in terms of things that I've done before, skills that I already have, and, kind of push the envelope for me. And that's what I think everybody should be doing.
Also, if you're a subscriber, hit the button. You'll know that I made a whole video about my decision to take money from investments that I had earmarked for retirement and start taking them out in January of 2025 and use them for travel. I'm still going to be working at the same time I'm taking these retirement funds, but I want to be able to enjoy the youth of my senior years while I'm still healthy and active, and I want to travel during that time. It's my choice, my decision. Imagine, I had dozens of long conversations with myself before making this decision, but imagine if I was in a couple, and imagine the discussion that would go on as part of a couple on a decision like this. Especially if one member of the couple didn't like to travel or didn't want to travel. That would just be a deal breaker for me if someone told me I would have to compromise on this kind of a thing, or that I couldn't go, period. That would be grounds for divorce as far as I'm concerned. Being silver and solo at this time of my life makes me feel like the ebb and flow of the Pacific tides, the drift of the continents, the very position of the sun along its ecliptic.
These are just a few of the things I control in my world.